RacerX has an awesome promo going on right now. If you subscribe or if you renew to RacerX, you're going to get 12 print issues, 12 digital issues, RacerX read-alouds. And I know Mathis has a new story out that he is going to give it to you in podcast form through a RacerX read-aloud. You get digital magazine archives, and one of the most popular things they do every year is the RacerX calendar. So the 2021 RacerX calendar is celebrating 50 years of AMA Pro Motocross. You're going to get that exclusive, one-of-a-kind calendar. If you subscribe or renew, be sure to do it at racerxonline.com/moto marketing. Hey, I want to tell you about Moto Brand. Moto Brand was founded during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic when the sport that we live for was taken from so many of us, whether it's cycling or moto, waking up on a Saturday morning knowing that your local track was closed, there would be no Supercross, and for many of us that we couldn't even hit our favorite local riding spot or trail with our crew. We are forced to be reminded of how much the sport of moto and cycling truly means to us. Moto Brand represents a collection of individuals that not only ride, but live to ride. It's what we think of at all times of the day, and sometimes at a detriment to your relationship with your significant other. It's for those that look at their motorcycle or their bicycle as part of their identity. Maybe it's the way that you bond with your son or your daughter or your spouse. Perhaps it's your way to blow off stress of your day job, or even, hey, it is what it is, maybe even it's your marriage. This sport is more than just a sport. For many of us, it's a way of life. It's what keeps us ticking. It's what keeps us living. Moto Brand was created for a purpose, to be more than just a shirt that you can throw on in the morning, but these designs represent who you are and what you stand for. So I encourage you to head over to the motobrand.com, check out our collection. We have a pedal collection and we have a throttle collection, and there are more designs to come that stand for something. So head over to the motobrand.com and we'll see you there.
Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast, presented by RacerX, the podcast for moto industry professionals, entrepreneurs, and riders. If you want to grow your brand and business in today's digital-first world, you have to know how to turn a stranger into a fan, turn a like into a customer. You have to know how to turn attention into dollars. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you in the know on real marketing tactics that work in the moto world so that you grow your business and help grow the sport. Get ready to learn from the very same marketing experts trusted by RacerX, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, GNCC, and NBC Sports. They'll help you navigate the world of digital marketing for your moto brand. This is the Moto Marketing Podcast. Presented by RacerX.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nesler. I got an exciting show today, somebody that you might not have expected me to have on, and it's somebody I've wanted to have on for a while because they've built something really cool while still having the typical day job, and something that I hope to see one day is his full-time focus. I've got Jamie Guida on with us today. You probably have no idea who that is because he always goes by the name of Darkside. Darkside, welcome to the show. I don't know if I want to call you Jamie or if I want to call you Darkside. What do you prefer?
Well, it doesn't matter, man. I mean, obviously my real name's Jamie. That's what I answer to on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. But typically doing this motor stuff, like we said off air, very few people actually know my real name, so I'll go whatever you're more comfortable with.
No, I hear you, man. It's I'm that's one of the things I want to learn about is where that came from. But listen, the reason I wanted to get you on the show today is, first off, your content, you're doing a really, really good job with everything, and you're expanding it, and you're a master networker. And the big reason, man, my pet peeve, or rant, if you will, is you get shit on a lot. You get a lot of hate, and I think that's good. If you don't have people hating on you, you don't have enough attention on you. But it has always kind of bugged the hell out of me how you get that negative pushback from just the moto fans, not all, but some.
Sure.
And I have, as somebody that runs a successful marketing company in moto, and I work in moto, it's my full-time gig, I've consistently looked at what you've done and been very impressed at how this just seemingly normal guy has networked to what some would say the pinnacle of the podcasting world. You're recently on Pulp. You do a show with Steve with the wrap-up show. What you have accomplished is tenfold what the traditional moto fan could ever do. And I really want to hear that story today because I know firsthand it's not easy to break into a sport that you love. It's not easy to network. And man, you've just done a really, really incredible job. You've had some of the biggest names in the sport on your own show, the MotoX Pod. So I want to talk about that. So let's take a step back first. Where did this all start? Were you just a moto fan at heart, just back racing in the day? And how did you get into where you are today?
Well, if we're talking specifically podcasting, discovered the PulpMX Show maybe 5 years ago, something like that. Had seen the advertisements, in the magazines, Racer X, and never really even knew what it was, never even considered it. I'm a big Kyle Chisholm fan. Like, Chiz is my guy. And I saw somewhere, maybe on his media, that he was on PulpMX. Oh, shit, I got to check this out. So I didn't discover PulpMX, and instantly I'm all in. Like, I'm going back and downloading all the old shows. Within a couple listens, I'm calling in every week, and just became a big fan, right? So, and Darkside came from, I'm a Star Wars nerd.
Okay, good. I wanted to know where the hell this name came from, so please.
Yeah, I'm just a big Star Wars nerd. Always loved the bad guys. Darth Vader just looks cool. When I created my first email back in the original AOL days, I was like, well, all right, I love Star Wars and motocross. So I just did Darkside MX3, raised my number. When I started calling into Pulp, a lot of people were using their Twitter handles. So I was like, oh, I'm Darkside. And it sort of stuck.
Got it.
So that's sort of the beginning of it. Maybe a year in, my buddy TJ, who is part of the MotoX Pod Show, and two other guys, Mark and Phil, started the MotoX Pod Show. It was a local show based out of Tyler, Texas. They would talk about local racing that they would go to and maybe touch on that week's Supercross or National or whatever. TJ knew who I was. He said, hey, I know who Darkside is. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Let's have him on as a guest. They invited me over, did it. I want to say the next day, they're like, hey, we really enjoyed having you in. Do you want to be a part of it? So that was sort of how that started. We started becoming a regular part of it. They weren't having any guests. They didn't really have any sponsors. Maybe they had done maybe 5 shows.
Yeah.
So I hit up some of my sponsors, like Shock Socks out of Dallas, Texas, and a couple other people, and just said, hey, can we get some product? Because it looks good to have a sponsor. No problem. I knew Texas guys like Charlie Bogard, Billy Whitley. So I asked guys, hey, do you want some guests? I can get these guys. And it started snowballing from there. One of my buddies had Robbie Raynard's number. He had bought a bike from Robbie. It's like, well, let me have that number. Texted Robbie, or I think I called him and he answered, and he's like, yeah, I'll come on. He wasn't even mad that I just randomly got his number, And,
and at this point, that show didn't really have much of a following, or did the guests at the time know, or were they just kind of doing you a solid and, yeah, come on? Like, now I feel like if, you're not going to call up a Christian Craig if you don't have a following and say, hey, you want to come on my rinky-dink show? And at the time, that's kind of what it was. It was a startup, and you got some guests. So how did that? I mean, was it just luck of the draw, and they said yes, or? Well,
again, thankfully, I knew Dennis Hawthorne, right? He's a Texas legend, arena cross legend. Sure. I knew him, so yeah, they were like, just because we were buddies, like, sure, no problem. And I told him, yeah, we're just starting out. We're trying to build some listenership, and at that time, I want to say it was less than 100 downloads per week, probably. It was very small.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of, we started networking, and it started growing throughout Texas, and some other people were picking it up. And eventually I requested, some other buddies of mine had a podcast in Houston, and I saw that they had gotten credentials for Dallas Supercross. And I was blown away. I was like, how'd you do that? So he's like, oh, you just email them, right? Well, I waited for nationals. We asked for some credentials for Colorado in 2018, I believe. Yeah, it was 17. And we got them, and I'm just blown away that this is even happening. Had no idea what to do. Flew up there for press day, got my credential, walked around like a normal fan. I didn't go in the tents. I didn't know I was allowed to. Mm-hmm. I stood outside Rocky Mountain, waiting for Blake Baggett, who was eating lunch at the time, for like 45 minutes. I just stood there like a fan staring. And his wife eventually, Keely, asked how I was doing. And I said, hey, I do this small podcast out of Texas. I would love to interview Blake if he's willing. She said, well, that's what we're here for. So Blake did an interview with me. Then I asked him at the end of it, we actually do a podcast. I would love to have you on. It's very small. Sure, man, here's my number.
That's awesome.
That was the first big number I got. That weekend, I also got like Austin Faulkner. Justin Hill was there that day, a bunch of pro circuit guys. And I realized, oh, wow, that's what they're here for. Not a big deal. I was still fanboying out quite a bit, but that was really the start of it. That's when we started getting numbers. I started meeting the mechanics, and I meet the wives, the girlfriends, the moms. I talk to everybody to build a relationship in the beginning. And I think people were really seeing that it was guys like Kenny Watson were telling me, dude, back then, he was with RCH, and he's like, I see how hard you're working. And that's where it started. That's
where my mass amount of respect for you, and this is the first time we've had a conversation. So anybody listening to this, I'm sure Jamie and I one day will consider ourselves friends, but this is the first time we've ever talked. I've admired you from afar because of what you're talking about, and I know what you've built with your podcast. It probably had a similar trajectory of how I built my business, and it was everybody wants. There's a saying that's everybody wants the fire, but nobody wants to chop the wood. Well, everybody wants to be Steve Mathis. Everybody wants to be a successful entrepreneur, but nobody wants to do the things that are scary. Talk to Blake and his wife and ask when you really don't feel like you're worthy of the ask. And it's even harder when it's a sport that you're a fan of, because it's so hard to set that just complete freak out that you have inside of you, aside from being professional. I mean, it happened to me 2 weeks ago. I mean, we work with some of the biggest brands in moto, and 2 weeks ago, I was, long story short, fortunate enough to have a brief conversation with James Stewart Sr. on the phone. And it was the first time in forever that I was like, okay, keep your cool. You're talking to Big James. It was weird for me. I still get that, and I think that's what makes our jobs fun. Is we are fans. We do love the sport, and what you've done is really cool, because you went from just being a fan, kind of watching from afar, to hey, I want to put my hat in the ring. You get one opportunity, and you create 4 from those. That day where you met Blake, you said 3 or 4 other names, so it's a snowball effect, correct?
Yeah, it really was. And part of it, like, I still talk to people. Some of the guys that are on the show now, we have a new guy, Scotty, and he still fanboys out a little bit. He's like, he's like, these are my it's so awesome, I'm getting to talk to these guys. And I get that, and I'm like, I kind of tell them that if you're cool, they're normal people, right? As long as you don't, they don't want to be like the fish in the fishbowl. You just talk to them like they're regular people, and they'll talk back to you that way. And I'm kind of fortunate. I grew up around a lot of friends in bands that open for big time bands, and I learned early in my young 20s. If you're just act normal, these guys will treat you like you're everybody else. I got to meet people like Madonna and some big time metal bands, and that kind of I learned that lesson, that just be cool, and then everybody else is cool. And I mean, the first time it really hit home, I'll tell you, was probably 19 at St. Louis. I was sitting in the back of Chad Reed's truck with Goose, who I'd met a few weeks earlier, just visiting. And Zach Osborne was walking through the pits, which is indoors there. And he saw me, he turned left and saw me. And I just literally met him 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks prior at Dallas for the first time. And he turned and came and talked to me. I was like, hey, man, good to see you back. Just so friendly. And I was like, okay, these guys are normal people.
Yep.
They're not the idols,
Yeah.
Like you kind of want to put them on a pedestal almost. And there's pretty much everybody I've met in the industry is really, really cool. What I've heard from a lot of the people that give me feedback, and even TJ, my producer, is that it's my personality. I try to be very friendly, very open. And you talked earlier about all the people giving me shit, and that's gone away quite a bit in the last year probably, but I just blow it off, man. I don't really care. It's like, whatever. That's not how I was raised. I was just raised to be polite and friendly to everybody.
Well, and it's worked. And I know it has to be hard to get. And here's the thing: when you're on the biggest media outlet in moto, PulpMX, when you get it, you're going to get it in droves because there's a mass amount of listeners. But at the same time, it was, and I think you probably know this, and I think that's probably why Steve has doubled down on it too. if you've got 100 people that hate you, you got probably 200 or 300 people that don't mind you, maybe 400 or 500 people that kind of like you. So
Sure.
with the hate, those are the people that are just obnoxious enough to really blast it out there. There's more people that don't come with that type of fire, and it means you're getting exposure, right? And if you can not let that beat you down, which you haven't, you've handled it really well. You've only gotten worked up maybe once or twice, and other than that, you've really handled it with complete professionalism, which I think is cool. And again, the reason I wanted you to come on the show today is to talk about things like, you go to a lot of these races and you're asking really good questions that I think a lot of other media guys are afraid to ask because they don't want to ask the hard stuff because they might piss somebody off. And I think you look at it a little bit differently. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know I remember hearing press conferences and I'm like, damn, that was a really good question by him. And it put the rider kind of on their heels. What I'm getting at is you're going to these events. You have a day job. You're paying, I would assume you're probably paying your way to get there. Talk to me about that because that takes balls, that takes hustle to say, I'm going to spend my own money, time away from my loved ones, and I'm going to go roll the dice and be part of the media and try to get something going here. How many of these races do you go to a year? Are you paying for it out of pocket? Like, talk to me about the thought process that goes through on that.
Sure. So we were real fortunate. I haven't paid for any of these races out of pocket per se. We've had a few sponsors early when we went to Lakewood in 2017. That kind of gave us a little money. We started a Patreon, and some of our listeners, like we got Hal Simpson, who I'm sure you've heard on PulpMX, he's the Dino super fan, has supported us from the beginning. Some other guys, Garrett Rockley, that reached out and helped us. There's another podcast guy that started out, Dented Pipe Podcast. He last year said, hey, I'm trying to get my foot in the door. I like what you're doing. What does it cost to do a full run, one race? And it's about $1,000 between airfare, food, hotel, car rental. He sent me $1,000. He said, well, I can't do it right now. Here's $1,000 to go to a round. But then we have some paying sponsors. The Cherubies pays. We have a couple others, X Brand and Blood Lubricants, Torque One Racing. They all help us. So thankfully, we basically break even. We get enough money per year to do right now about 6 or 7 races. And that's what we do. Yeah, I have a full-time job. I pretty much save my vacation.
What is your full-time job, if you don't mind me asking?
Say that again?
What is your full-time job, if you don't mind me asking?
I work for the Public Works Department in the town in Texas I work in. So basically we do water, street, sewer. Man,
it's just a very normal job. Like, it's just it's freaking amazing.
I was just replacing a culvert literally an hour ago.
Yeah.
I left early for this because this is way more fun.
Dude, you are a moto. You're the same as all the other moto fans out there. You got construction workers and just normal guys. That's what's cool about you is you're a normal guy that went from being a fan that was on the sidelines to saying, hey, I want to try to get a little bit closer to the action. And you've done it. I want to dive more into that when we come back and pay the bills, do a little business. We'll be back in just a second to talk to Darkside about what's next for his media career. How are we going to progress that? We'll be right back. Hey, I want to tell you about our friends at Flex Racing. Flex Racing is a one-stop shop for all custom designs and products that you need to look good at the racetrack. Flex creates some of the most stunning and custom race day materials available today, designing and manufacturing products that help you represent your team and your sponsors. Products like custom pop-up tents, table covers, chairs, umbrellas, bike graphics, bike mats, even gear bags. And I'm telling you, the gear bags, they're sick. We're going to get some made for Impakt and our EMTB team. They're awesome. If you need your name or your logo on it, chances are these guys can take care of it for you. Flex also provides rider and team logos, truck and trailer wrap designs, custom t-shirts, and even jackets. Not only are the designs killer, but my favorite thing, the prices, right? They care about giving you the best possible price because Flex is entirely made up of riders and racers. They understand how expensive it is to look good and to be professional, so they've tailored the prices on all the products to be as affordable as possible to help privateers, big teams, small teams, everybody in between save the money that you guys need for things like travel, race fees, food, etc. They simply get it, right? Flex Racing's motto is secure the vision. They know that greatness exists in all of us, and they're here to help us bridge the gap between our vision and our reality. So maybe it's time to replace your pop-up from last season, or you need some fresh new gear, or maybe even need to replace those graphics on your bike to display your team logo. Give my friends at Flex Racing a shot. You can check them out at flexracing.com. Let them know that Impakt sent you. Let them know that you listen to the Moto Marketing Podcast, and you can save 15%. Hey, big shout out to our friends at FMF. Little D and the guys are always doing some pretty exciting things, not just with the performance products, but man, they've got the coolest apparel in the game, and I want to give you guys an opportunity to get that at a little bit of a discount. If you go to FMF and pick up any gear you'd like, hats, shirts, whatever it is, upon checkout, if you enter the code MMP30, MMP30, you can get 30% off. So MMP30 at checkout and get 30% off your order on FMF apparel. All right, welcome back to the show. We got Darkside on with us and just talking about creating something really cool from nothing and kind of what's next, and why I have so much respect for what you're doing and what you've done is kind of what you just alluded to. I mean, I want everybody to know that, you know, when any second you have to maximize your time, you're doing it. You know, you had said when you're on your lunch and you're clocked out and you're supposed to be able to have an hour to yourself to just eat and decompress from your job, you're hustling and grinding and cutting and trying to book guests for the next show. And, you know, as soon as you get off work, it's for anybody that knows who Gary Vaynerchuk or Grant Cardone, who those guys are, it's the hustle. It's maximizing every single second, and you've done that. So I want to know, what's next? Like, I can't imagine you putting in this type of work to build what you're trying to build, to not have any aspiration of quitting your day job and doing this full time. Is that the dream, to build this thing to where you are a full-time moto media guy, or are you just, this is just what you do and you have fun doing it and you want to keep your job you got now and continue to do what you're doing?
I would definitely say that's the dream. I am not wired like Mathis, where it's, you know, he talks about betting on himself, right? And he left Canada, came down here, slept in a garage. I'm not wired like that. I got a kid, I've got stepkids, you know, I'm worried about that kind of stuff. I would love for my show, the Moto X Pod show, to sustain itself. Mm-hmm. It's not anywhere near that right now. I don't feel, I'm not as good at the job as Steve is. The stuff that Steve can do, the things he remembers and the details are part of why he's so good. But yeah, the dream is for sure. I would love for it to be in the industry, to get it bigger. You know, I've joked with him. I'd love for him to take our show on as part of the Pulp Nation, right? On, you know, like the Moto X Spot show presented by PulpMX. I don't know that he has no interest in that right now, and that's fair. But yes, the dream is to have it be a full-time thing. It's very far off, I think.
Look, it is, but at the same time, I was kind of surprised you said 5 years ago you started listening to Pulp?
About that, because this show's been 4 years, so yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, just think about what you've done in 5 years. I'm thinking, like, you've listened to Pulp since it started. Like, man, like, from the time I was, like, 14, I tried to figure out, how can I work for Racer X? How can I work in this industry? And I'm 31 now, and it's taken me this long to where now, like, we really don't work with anybody that's not in moto or cycling. We work with both those industries. For you to just start out as a caller 5 years ago on Pulp and have what you have now, just the memorabilia you have that you can see on camera, and then what you showed me before, that shit is very hard to get alone. Like, you've built this network of people that, man, I think it feels like it's been forever, but I think you're honestly just getting started. Knowing how hard you're working and the time you're putting in and capitalizing on that, I have no doubt. Maybe it doesn't look like it does now. It might not be the Moto X Pod show. It might be something else, but somebody that works as hard as you do, and, you know, you said Kenny Watson knows who you are. I mean, there are guys that are the decision makers in the sport that you keep doing what you're doing and keep hustling and networking and building connections like you have with Steve. It's just a matter of time till that pays off. Talk to me about your relationship with Pulp and with Steve. And I think you guys, Steve has this role that he plays, and he bags on you, him and Kiefer, like to bust your chops and whatnot, but at the same time, I know that they respect you. I know that they consider you a friend. Talk to me about that kind of maturation of the relationship from the time you were just a caller to now you have a show that you do with them. You've been in studio. Talk to me about what that's looked like and what that's done for your career so far.
All right. Yeah. So it started out 18 at Dallas Supercross. Saw Steve in the pits and waited again like a fan. I exited at 17. And he was at the Pro Circuit truck sitting next to Mitch Payton and Jason Wygant. And again, fanboying out. I'm just standing there waiting. He finally came over, talked to me, said, "Hey, man, I'm Darkside." I said, "Oh, yeah, cool. Signed my shirt, typical fan. That was my introduction one-on-one to him. Later that same day, Kenny Watson saw me, again, way before the podcast, crossed out Steve's name, signed his name over the top of it.
That's awesome.
Fast forward 1 year, we're doing the Moto X-Pod show, and I get credentials to Dallas Supercross. He's sitting there, and I again introduce myself, and I sit next to him the whole night. I try not to bug him too much, but he's very friendly. Fast forward another year. The next year, I've been on this show for a while. I start asking questions about, hey, when do you know to not say something that you've heard, they told you, but when do you find that line? I think that was one of the first questions I asked him, and he kind of talked to me about stuff like that. And, over the next few months, year or whatever, he would give me advice on equipment. If I was having technical issues, I could email him before I had his phone number. We all know that he's kind of weird about, he doesn't become friends with everybody. No. But over time, he started giving me more and more advice. He busts my balls like crazy on the show, but he will text me, hate to pull the curtain aside, but he'll text me and say, "Hey, man, I'm just joking, And
yeah, and I think everybody knows that probably happens. I've had the privilege of having him on and interacting with him in the pits, and it's the same person, but it's kind of the on-camera Steve versus the off-camera Steve, and I think we all have that. Like, I'm way more mellow in person than I am on some of my social content, and I think Steve, it's part of the character. But yeah, I would have bet my paycheck on it that Steve has kind of a soft spot for you, and even though he tells you you're doing everything wrong on every wrap-up show, he wouldn't have gone out and got sponsors for it if it wasn't what he was hoping. So
he's paying me. So
exactly. So that relationship, how many doors has that opened? Because I have a similar relationship with the Coombs family and MX Sports, and I owe a lot of the people that I know today, Steve being one of them, because of that. Is that similar to your relationship with Steve as far as meeting new riders and figureheads of the sport?
I don't know that he's really introduced me to anybody. I think most of that I've done on my own.
That's awesome.
He has definitely helped with, he's really good about, like he talks about on his sponsors. If you need something, I don't know if you watched last night to the live show, but he's talking about wanting to get free stuff from his sponsors. Wes Williams was on, and they were talking about getting free stuff. And when I called him, I never asked for anything free, but Steve has hooked me up with some deals through some of his sponsors. So he's helped me in that way. I really can't think of anybody industry-wise he's introduced me to that I've gotten to be able to have a guest. I think I've pretty much
You've done that all yourself. That's awesome.
My own for the most part.
That's your strength, is the networking side of it. So with Steve, it's more just kind of being able to pick his brain on, more of the business side of it and the technical side. Yeah, super valuable.
Yeah, very valuable. I mean, he gives me crap every week about saying the name of the Moto X-Pod show on the wrap-up show. But in the original conversation, he's like, "You can promote your show. It's fine."
That's what I mean. It's part of the character.
Yeah. Steve, anybody that listens knows he's a Howard Stern fan. There's a little bit of that in the show, right?
Sure.
There's a little bit of character there to build the content. I mean, and a lot of what he says, he means it to a degree. He maybe exaggerates it a little.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's been exceptionally rad. I mean, without him, a lot of the doors as far as the wrap-up show and more people knowing who I am would not have happened.
Yeah, no doubt. So what's next for your personal brand with the Darkside brand and just Moto X Pod? Like, what? I mean, you told me you've got a pretty big guest coming on tonight's show. I mean, like, where is it? Just the hamster wheel of just bringing people on, or is there kind of a greater vision of what you're wanting to do? Have you thought that far ahead?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how to answer that. I'm so busy. I feel like with my regular job and family and trying to squeeze all this stuff in, it's hard for me to think real far in the future. Like right now, I'm thinking Supercross 21. How do we make this happen? How do we make these rounds? That's about as far ahead as I'm thinking. We're always trying to improve on things on the show. We come up with different little content. Maybe 3 months ago, I came up with the idea of a segment, basically like the Newlywed Game, kind of like Steve did with A-Ray and Cade. But I got Daniel Blair and his wife Maggie Blair on Instagram Live, and I do basically the wedding or the Newlywed Game, and I've done it with Adam Entenap and Ash Money, Zach Osborne and Brittany Osborne, numerous ones, right? So I'm trying to do these different things that people will like. That's a little bit outside the box of what the other pods are doing.
Sure.
Tonight, actually, on the show, I don't know when this episode will drop for you, but our show tonight, Jeremy Martin's going to be on. But we're gonna introduce a new segment that's basically just a free-flowing conversation about any topic that's not moto related. We're going to let our listeners send topics in, and if we like topics, we're going to get them on to discuss it. And it's just going to be an open discussion. We're still debating on some names for the title of it, but we're trying to do some things that aren't just moto related, exactly like everybody else is doing. Yeah. Like I told Steve last night in this conversation, I don't really want to be PulpMX. I don't. He asked about the Spy Moto shows, right? Wes Williams was in. He does those videos for Red Bull, and they talked about getting our show on there, like a lot of the other podcasts. We really don't cover the Supercross race from the weekend before a lot on our show because everybody does that, and Steve does it so well.
Right.
What the hell could we honestly talk about that he didn't cover?
Sure.
So I want to go in a little different direction, but finding that niche is difficult. And so
I like that though, because I think if you look at I think this is a really good example. If you look at Racer X and then you look at Transworld and you look at MXA, a lot and the others that were out there, a lot of the magazines covered a lot of the same stuff. When Racer X first came in, they were the first, I believe, they were the first lifestyle brand or lifestyle publication. It was very different than everybody else. Look who's left. It's Racer X for the most part. Like the biggest name in the sport. I'm not just saying this because this is part of their network. It's the truth, and I think everybody knows that. I think if you said it, there's so many people that cover the sport, and that's why I did this show. I don't make money on this show. I did it because it's fun. It's a good way for me to network, and I enjoy it. I'm not going to come in and give a breakdown of Zach Osborne's championship performance. It's very different, and I think you're trying to do, it sounds like, something similar to where it's find your niche. What can you do to entice me to add your show in my Rolodex of podcasts? Because Jason Thomas, he does, breakdowns, but it's from the racer standpoint. Steve has his thing. I don't listen to DMXS, but they're different in some ways than Steve. And you kind of doing unique things like the Newlywed Game. I think that's what you keep doing that, and you eventually something hits, and that's where you stick and find your groove. The biggest thing is you're a master networker. I mean, that's what's apparent. Like, it's for you to get someone like Jeremy Martin on your show is very, very, very impressive. I can't commend you enough, man. I think it's cool what you've done, and I'm excited to see what you continue to do with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, as far as the networking, McGrath was the big get for me, man.
Yeah.
Show 100, which was about a week or two after MX of Nations at Redbud. I've been working on that show for a long time. And Vanessa O'Brien is the PR lady for Kawasaki, Factory Kawasaki. She's been insanely helpful with me over the last couple of years. And I just kept hitting her up, hey, can you get me McGrath? And she's working on it. And she's like, look, she said, Jeremy's down to do it, but he doesn't really know you, so he's kind of taking a while. And I was like, all right, well, hey, we're going to be at Redbud this weekend. He's going to be there. Can you get me an introduction? She said, I'll try. So all day at Redbud, I'm trying to meet McGrath, and this is, McGrath's the king, dude. I don't know that I can keep my cool around McGrath, but I got to try.
Yeah.
So it's not working. He's busy all day. And then I happen to be walking to get some food, and there's this big group of people around somebody. And I kind of figure out who it is, and it's McGrath. So I wait my turn, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm Darkside from the show. Vanessa was trying to get us hooked up. Oh yeah, you're the guy from Texas. That's me, man. I just want to put a face to the request and hope that you'll come on. And he's like, cool. And I walk off.
Yep.
30 minutes later, Vanessa texts me, he's in.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
it's stuff like that, you know, that I'll do whatever it takes. I try to be really friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I understand these guys are super busy, and like this time of year, they don't want to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I text them a couple times. I texted Jeremy and Martin, and yeah, he's in tonight. And,
I think there's there's a lot of people that this show's so unique because you have CEOs and C-level executives of moto brands, and then you have high school and college students that are trying to figure out how can they get their foot in the industry. And man, there's so much to take away from what you've said. Just that interaction, that story, that interaction with Jeremy McGrath, and how you don't have to stand there and tell him how great he is and how much you idolize him. Like it's complete.
I did
wrong.
do that once he was on the show,
and that's all right. You know, it's fine. But
Yeah.
to get his attention, sometimes you probably left a bigger mark on him in that group of people than anybody else, and all you did was say, hey, I want to put a face to the request, hope to have you on, super professional, kind of let him go on about his day. There's so much to take away from what you've talked about, that if you're a young professional wanting to figure out how can I get my opportunity, listen to this again and listen to the little nuances that Jamie has talked about through his career over the past 5-6 years. It's a big deal. If you can network, you'll never be without a job. If you can sell, you'll never be without a job. And networking is simply selling yourself, and that's why you've built what you've built. Man, it's super cool. Like so we've built this studio. We've had one in-person guest. It was Tim Cotter a couple weeks ago because of COVID. But I hope one of these days when life is normal again and High Point is going on, if you make it out, we'd love to have you in studio and take a deeper dive into it, because I think what you're building, it's one of those things that we can check in on every year and just kind of see the evolution of it. And I genuinely, I'm not blowing smoke, I have a lot of respect for what you've built and maintaining that day job and grinding and hustling. It's damn cool, man. I appreciate you telling your story.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I do want to give a shout out again to my producer,
Sure.
TJ Smith, because honestly, as much as I'm sort of have become the face of this thing, he is the technical side. He's our Travis Marks, our Dune Goon. There's not a show that goes by that I'm not like, oh shit, there's a technical issue. And he's back working in a hot shot, and so he's not here all the time, but I can call him, and over the phone, he fixes my technical issue every single time. He's always like, well, what'd you touch? What'd you screw up? And I don't know, but he'll fix it. So this show would not happen without him. He's figured out how to get it on YouTube Live with the cameras, just like Mark's did. We'll be YouTube Live tonight if everything goes as planned. So I got to give him a shout out. And Cherubies USA is our title sponsor. I'd like to give them a shout out. But dude, I'm blown away. You even invited me on. Like I don't always feel like I'm part of the cool kids crowd, with this yet. So to be invited on to your podcast with Racer X Moto Marketing, it's pretty rad.
No, man, I appreciate you being on, and I mean everything I said. So the reason you don't feel that way is because you're part of a really big audience with Pulp, and there are a lot of people that, again, like to shit on Darkside. But what you've built is so incredibly hard. I guarantee you 99% of, this might get me some hate, the Pulp community, the people that listen, could not replicate and do what you've done, and I have a ton of respect for it. This show, we're kind of lean on episodes right now, so this one's going to go out much quicker than normal. I think cool. Josh is going to work on getting this one out same week. Normally we're 2-3 weeks delayed on them. We just have a catalog of them that, due to COVID, we've kind of run a little dry. So yours, by the time this comes out, Jeremy Martin will have already been on your show, so I encourage everybody to go back and check that out. I'm going to do the same. I'm curious to kind of hear about his transition from Geico over to Star. So this will be same week as your show, and yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure our paths will cross once we're allowed to all be at these events again, and I'm looking forward to kind of watching the evolution of the Moto X Pod show and everything else you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. It means a lot. I appreciate it. It's still, like I said, it's weird to have when people ask me to be on their podcast, but I enjoy it.
No, for sure.
And,
you deserve it,
a lot, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate you being on.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impakt Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpakt.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.